What's going on, guys? Alpha the Wizard back at it with another video. Today we're going to be covering March to September of 2006 in the meta history of Yu-Gi-Oh! So in today's video, we're going to be covering Chaos Recruiter. This was right in the midst of Return Chaos format, or if you will, Chaos Return format. So this format was centered around a lot of Chaos decks, preferably Return from the Different Dimension in most people's decks, but some people opted to play other versions of Chaos, and this is one I'm going to showcase. So instead of maximizing on Return from the Different Dimension, we maximize in this deck on Recruiters. So basically it's a Recruiter type deck. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and hop right in. So to start things off, we have the center of the deck. We have 3 Chaos Sorcerers. So Chaos Sorcerer is the central strategy of this deck, trying to banish as many lights and darks as possible in most decks to return from the different dimension and back. But in our deck, we play more tribute summons so that we can maximize on those as opposed to seeing like a return from the different dimension. But yeah, so we still try to fuel our graveyard as quick as possible with lights and darks to try to abuse this card as much as we can. And then, of course, we have to play Jinzo. Jinzo is another key component to this format because it turns off Return from the Different Dimension. This profile is going to look very similar to the last one, but I promise you they're actually quite different. But a lot of the staples are the same. So like Jinzo or Zaborg, for example, we still play 2 Zaborg because it is like the perfect tribute summon light. It's really, really good for the format because it just inherently deals with problematic cards by being able to tribute. And yeah, Zaborg is really, really solid. And then we do play 1 Mobius in this build. The reason why we play Mobius is we want to be able to force the return from the different dimension early, or to just +1 and punish them for setting too many back row. Plus there are a plethora of like burn strategies out there as well, so Mobius is just good to have. But then in this particular build, we play 2 Cyber Dragon. We don't max out on this in this version. Cyber Dragon is centrally good because of like Zaborg, Mobius, Jinzo, but it also is just a big body at outing things in this particular build. And then we also, in this build, play Asura Priest. We mainly play this card for the mirror match. If we play any other Recruiter variants, Asura Priest just inherently deals with them. So yeah, this card is just really decent at best this format. It's only good in certain matchups. If they don't play many Recruiters, then Asura Priest isn't the greatest. Some people actually side it. But yeah, and then of course we have to play Breaker. Breaker just keeps progressively getting better every single format. Forcing a return from the different dimension is just really, really good. So yeah, we gotta play Breaker, but then we also have to play DD Warrior Lady. And I'm sure you guys know why DD Warrior Lady is so good, but in this particular build, the reason why we are maximizing on the lights and darks around this is Shining Angel. So Shining Angel, our only target for this is DD Warrior Lady, unfortunately, and itself, of course. But the thing is, the faster we can get our lights in the graveyard, the faster we can summon Chaos Sorcerer. So the Recruiter builds typically would use cards like Shining Angel and also Mystic Tomato. So in this build, I do play 2 Mystic Tomato, mainly because we want to have as many Recruiters as possible. We don't play as much back row, so we want to maintain a board presence. So that's why we're playing like so many Recruiters, because our back row is relatively limited. But then we also play Tsukiyomi. So Tsukiyomi is pretty good in this deck. It outs problematic cards like a Monarch, but it's not the greatest in this particular variant. It's more so better in like the Dokoichi decks, but we don't necessarily play Dokoichi in this build. But I still say Tsukiyomi is really good for outing specific things in the format like Monarchs. But we also play a Sangan. Sangan's pretty staple in retro decks. And then we still got to play an Exiled Force. This build is very similar to the last Chaos Return deck that I profiled, but at the same time, they have their huge differences like the Recruiter aspect. But Exiled Force is still mandatory nonetheless. Now in this particular version, we are also maximizing on Spirit Reaper. We can really abuse Spirit Reaper because we play Mystic Tomato. So being able to have access to a searchable Spirit Reaper, even if we have to take damage because we have to summon it in attack mode, just having that on the field it creates quite the presence. But then last but not least, we also play 2 Magician of Faith. Faith is so good in this format, mainly because Graceful Charity is legal. I don't know why they brought back Graceful Charity for this format, but Faith is really good because of it, but it also can recycle other, utility spell cards that you may need. But yeah, so that's all the monsters for this format, or for this deck in this format. Moving on to the spells, we still have power spells such as Confiscation, Graceful Charity. Graceful Charity is just a mandatory staple that, looking back, nobody would ever cut it. And then, of course, we have Heavy Storm, which changes formats. People have to play around it. And then 1 Mystical Space Typhoon. The card is at 1, or probably would play a lot more than 1, to be quite honest with you. But we also play Snatch Steal. Snatch Steal is really, really good this format because you could simply just take a recruiter and you could tribute over it. Or you could just take their Chaos Sorcerer and banish a monster. So yeah, Snatch Steal is really, really solid. But then Premature Burial for obvious reasons, because this is a power spell that can help you OTK. But this is a more controlled variant as opposed to trying to OTK. And we also play 2 Noblemen of Crossout. Nobleman is prevalent this format because people are setting so many monsters like the Koichis, recruiters, things of that nature. Nobleman just gets way better. And it feels good hitting Sangan. But then we do play Scapegoat too. This card also is at 1. But yeah, Scapegoat is just in such a slow format. We're trying to control the tempo, and Scapegoat really helps with that. Not to mention, we also play Creature Swap. So Creature Swap in tandem with Scapegoat is really good, and it gives really good value. And not to mention, Creature Swap with Recruiters is really good as well, because you could just go Creature Swap, give them Mystic Tomato, attack over Tomato, summon another Tomato, use that Tomato to crash into that Tomato, and then summon Spirit Reaper and attack directly. So yeah, Creature Swap serves a really good purpose with Recruiters. And then we do play Smashing Ground, because there are other decks that are maximizing on Spirit Reaper, so we gotta have outs for problematic cards like Spirit Reaper, Chaos Sorcerer, things like that. And then in all my retro decks, I always play Enemy Controller because this card is so good for these kind of formats. Because you contribute a goat token, take one of their monsters, or it can act as an interruption and switch their monster to defense just for you to beat over it next turn. Same principle as Book of Moon. Book of Moon's very similar in the same perspective. Basically, it's an interruption, plus you can out problematic cards relatively easy. But yeah, that's really it for the spell cards of this format in this deck. And in this particular build, we don't play many traps, only 2. Torrential Tribute and Mirror Force. These are the only 2 that you really need in this format. Or in this particular build, I should say. Now, if this deck may be a little short, that is partially due to the fact that I let somebody use my Royal Decrees, but the reason why we only play these 2 traps is because we main deck 3 Royal Decrees. So yeah, Royal Decree is quite mandatory this format. In this particular deck, because we're not playing a lot of trap cards. So having Royal Decree is going to allow us to just shut off Return from the Different Dimension. I did find 2 decrees here, but you want to have 3 in this particular deck because you're just utilizing your recruiters with Decree face up on the field, and you are just controlling the game from there. But yeah, that's it for this profile. Definitely leave a like, comment, subscribe down below, and I will see you in the next one.